This is a preview of episode 13.2, The Madness of Cormac McCarthy's The Crossing. For access to the full thing, sign up for a premium subscription to Method Madness via Substack or Patreon. You can find the links at madmethodpod.com/subscribe. Also, in the year 2026, if you sign up for an annual premium subscription via Substack or Patreon, you'll not only get early access to all guest episodes and exclusive access to these Madness presentations, you'll also get a signed special edition of my new novel, The Earthen Dark, that includes a one-card tarot reading with card and 2 hand-edited manuscript pages from early drafts of the novel writing process. This special edition, unfortunately, is only available for people with a U.S. postal address. Anyway, here's the preview. Enjoy. Now, as I'm thinking about all of this, I'm starting to see curious increments between man and wolf that we really don't have with any other animals. There are wolves at one end of the spectrum and men at the other. A dog to a wolf must seem like a wolf with attributes both human and wolf, much as the dog seems to us like a wolf that has some of our attributes. But there are other configurations in our lore. The werewolf. Why does the werewolf figure so heavily in European folklore, and why are we still making movies and writing novels about it? There is no enduring archetype of the werelion or the werebear or the weredeer, only the werewolf, which, in most modern iterations, is a man who magically transforms into a wolf-like monster, often under the full moon. This, it turns out, is a very, very old trope. To find the first textual rumblings of such a thing, one has to go all the way back to the histories of Herodotus, in which the historian tells of a Scythian tribe who transforms into a pack of wolves once a year. The Greek geographer Pausanias in the 2nd century BC wrote of men transforming into wolves in association with the ritual child sacrifices on the altar of Zeus Lycaeus, who I mentioned a little bit earlier in this episode. Virgil, in the Eclogues, writes of a man named Morus who used herbs to turn himself into a wolf. Later, Augustine of Hippo explains that there is a general belief that witches can turn men into werewolves. Other early Christian writers referred to men who could turn into wolves as verspiales, which translates to turn skin, a term not unlike that of skinwalker used in North America. In the medieval era, we get the legendary werewolves of Ossory, a tribe of werewolves who descend from the warrior werewolf named Aegnek Phailad. It's Celtic, I have no idea. In Scandinavia and the Slavic territories, the werewolf was similarly omnipresent, including such stories as that of the 11th century Belarusian Prince Vyacheslav of Polat. In Western Europe, the werewolf was associated with witchcraft. In Central and Eastern Europe, the werewolf was associated with the vampire. And the thing is, this wasn't just folklore and ghost stories. Many writers of the medieval and even later periods noted that belief in werewolves was widespread among the common people. All of this led up to a phenomenon that historians call the werewolf trials, beginning in the 15th century in Switzerland. These investigations, trials, and executions ran mostly parallel to and sometimes entangling with witch trials occurring at the same time. The first notable emergence of werewolf trials occurred in Valais, modern-day Switzerland, against the backdrop of the persecution of the Waldensians and a regional rebellion which had weakened the local ruling class. From 1428 to sometime in the early 1430s, approximately 200 accused witches and werewolves were burned at the stake, some who had confessed under torture to making a pact with the devil, a common cause of mystical lycanthropy, and others who had merely been accused by neighbors. From this first werewolf trial in Switzerland to the final werewolf convictions in Europe in the 18th century, you're looking at nearly 400 years of werewolf persecution, with unknown thousands burned, hung, or otherwise tortured to death. Among these were certainly innocents, as well as a few people stricken with what psychiatry now calls clinical lycanthropy, that is, people who think they're wolves or other animals. But the trials also likely caught some agents of violence and immorality whose actions could only be understood at the time as being inspired by the devil. A perfect example of this latter category is that of a Frenchman named Guy Garnier. Guy Garnier was living on the outskirts of a town called Dole in France in the 1560s and 1570s. He was apparently desperately poor, living with his wife in a shack in the woods, barely getting by on whatever he could manage to forage. He was something of a hermit with a reputation in town for trespassing and belligerency. And then, in 1572, local children started to go missing. The bodies of others were found, partially eaten. The story goes that a few men traveling in from a nearby town stumbled upon Guy Garnier with the body of a dead child. Some in the group said that in the dim light of their approach, they actually first saw the profile of a wolf. Garnier was arrested and under torture, which was basically the first move of a late medieval, early Renaissance investigation. Garnier confessed to killing 4 children and said that he'd been granted the ability to shapeshift in a wolf by agreement with a ghost or a demon, and this gave him apparently tremendous hunting prowess with which he preyed on the locals for sustenance. He supposedly tore a 12-year-old boy, quote, in half with bites in one incident. And another, a girl aged 10 or 12, he dragged into a vineyard where he ate her flesh raw before taking some of it home to his wife to cook. More than 50 witnesses testified against Garnier, and combined with his confession, he was burned at the stake. There's also the story of a Dutchman named Jan Leloup, who was executed in 1607. Under torture, he confessed that he and 2 other accomplices, one a man named Henry Gardin, who was also executed, had committed themselves to werewolfery through sexual relation with the devil. Together, supposedly, the 3 werewolves had kidnapped and eaten a child. Now, as Renaissance thought emerged, the werewolf and witch trials gradually subsided. But this did not mean there were no werewolves or stories of them. For instance, the Beast of Gévaudan remains a historical mystery. From 1764 to 1767, at least 100 deaths were attributed to a mysterious man-eating creature hunting the Margeride Mountains. It was reported to be dog-like and enormous, quote, like a wolf, yet not a wolf, end quote. After the first killing of a young woman tending to cattle, the attacks grew rapidly in number, while livestock, the usually preferred food source for wolves, went largely untouched. Church documents about this period include anecdotes such as, quote, on February 11 was buried a little girl about 12 years old who had been partially devoured in the present day by a man-eating beast that has been ravaging this country for nearly 3 months, end quote. While the official position was that the beast was an abnormal wolf or perhaps a dog-wolf hybrid, many of the locals were convinced that a werewolf was the culprit, and many of the men of the area sought to kill the thing, laying traps, going out on hunting expeditions, but no one could ever see the beast for long enough to point their rifle at it. It's from this episode, in fact, that we get the idea that only a silver bullet can kill a werewolf. The people were desperate for anything that might work. It got bad enough that the king ended up sending in his number 1 hitter, a guy named Francois Antoine. He did manage to kill an abnormally large wolf, and the community celebrated, believing its reign of terror was over, but just 2 months passed before the killings started once again. Eventually, a local farmer shot and killed an unusual animal, a dog-like beast that weighed in at over 140 pounds, with odd stripes indicative of something other than a wolf. But this was not, to my mind anyway, just a one-off or a miscommunication that became folklore on down the decades. And the Beast of Gévaudan is not the only strange wolf-like creature out there. To hear the team of Skinwalker Ranch tell it, there's been at least one inexplicable wolf here in North America, and it seems to line up perfectly with stories of mysterious cattle slaughters in the area.
While the drilling operation continued at the mesa, we went back to the command center for a video conference with ranch owner Brandon Fugel and biologist Ben Woodruff.
In the wake of the discovery of the wolf-like creature in the Dry Gulch Creek, I actually engaged Colossal Biosciences, which is the leading genetics and life sciences company on the planet right now for studying this type of material. And we got back some really interesting DNA data.
I'm on the edge of my seat here.
Oh, what is that?
What is that?
1 year ago, we found the decayed carcass of a wolf-like creature that had a freakishly large jawbone and teeth. So, given the legends about wolf-like creatures that Skinwalker Ranch is actually named after, Eric asked biologist Ben Woodruff to examine the jawbone. And believe it or not, the closest match he could find was a juvenile dire wolf, a predatory animal that supposedly went extinct more than 10,000 years ago.
Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you since you've been reviewing the analysis provided by Colossal and can provide greater context to why this is truly, I think, earth-shattering.
Certainly. We knew this animal was some species of canine, and so what we did is we had Colossal test this DNA against the DNA of other species of canines, like wolves and coyotes and foxes and domestic dogs. Looking over this pie chart that has all the genetic results from Colossal, it shows that 11% of this species is Canis lupus, the modern-day gray wolf. but it matches specifically with the Eurasian gray wolf and a Greenland gray wolf. These are modern species, but the strange thing is they're species that don't cross over in their range with each other, and they're not found here in the United States.
Interesting.
But that's only 11%. The other 89% is a mystery. It is some sort of wolf, but a wolf that we do not have any genetic record of anywhere.
So if this is showing that 89% of this is unknown material, that's really exciting.
It means it's a 9 out of 10 chance that it's not a standard gray wolf, right?
Correct. This wolf creature kind of rewrites the history books. Whatever this animal is, it's either a new species or it's an old species that we did not know was running around this region. The Utah Division of Wildlife Resources claims that there are no wolves or wolf packs in Utah, so there should be no wolves on the ranch at all.
Quote, "He trudged in his dream through a deep snow along a ridge toward a darkened house, and the wolves had followed him as far as the fence. They ran their lean mouths against each other's flanks, and they flowed about his knees and furrowed the snow with their noses and tossed their heads, and in the cold their pooled breath made a cauldron about him, and the snow lay so blue in the moonlight, and those eyes were palest topaz where they crouched and whined and tucked their tails, and they fawned and shuddered as they drew close to the house, and their teeth shone that were so white, and their red tongues lolled. At the gate they would go no further. They looked back toward the dark shapes of the mountains. He knelt in the snow and reached out his arms to them, and they touched his face with their wild muzzles and drew again, and their breath was warm, and it smelled of the earth and the heart of the earth. When the last of them had come forward, they stood in a crescent before him, and their eyes were like footlights to the ordinate world, and then they crawled and wheeled away and loped off through the snow and vanished smoking into the winter night. In the house, his parents slept, and when he crawled into his bed, Boyd turned to him and whispered that he'd had a dream, and in the dream, Billy had run away from home, and when he woke from the dream and seen his empty bed, he'd thought that it was true. "Go to sleep," Billy said. "You won't run off and leave me, will you, Billy?" "No." "You promise?" "Yes, I promise." "No matter what?" "Yes, no matter what." "Billy, go to sleep." "Billy, hush, you'll wake them." But in the dream, Boyd only said softly that they would not wake. End quote. In the 19th and into the 20th century, hunters devised many ways to kill a wolf. Here's from an 1894 pamphlet that I'm almost certain McCarthy read. It's basically a sales brochure from the Newhouse Company entitled How to Catch Wolves with the Newhouse Wolf Trap. Quote, "In the ranching districts of North America today, it is variously estimated that each gray wolf costs the cattlemen from $50 to $500 annually. The wolf hunter has to cope with an animal of almost human intelligence, an animal without superior in sagacity among all the wild beasts of the chase, and one which will tax his utmost ability to circumvent. 25 years ago, it was comparatively easy to poison wolves. Strychnine was then new in the West, and the wolves fell victim to it in hundreds. But the reasoning power that they have so highly developed, combined with their faculty of communicating to each other their experiences, have practically placed these cattle killers beyond the reach of poison. And it is little more than an accident now when a wolf is so killed. Hunting with hounds, besides being extremely costly, is not practicable in rough country. And good steel traps are the only device that have proved effectual at all times and in all places. A hunter should have at least 100 traps, and the catch of these in an ordinary country will keep him busy skinning when not actually engaged in setting the traps themselves. Having his traps with their chains and grab hooks complete, the hunter's first care is to kill the odor of the iron. This may be done by smoking the traps with cedar, by rubbing them with beeswax, or by dipping them in fresh blood." End quote. By the time of Billy Parham's youth, wolves had been nearly routed from all of North America, not just New Mexico. But it is a hardy species, difficult to kill entirely. Despite the legend of the character in the book Mr. Eccles, who is likely a professional hunter employed by the government or hired freelance by ranchers, pockets of wild wolves remained in New Mexico until 1980. And yet, in Billy's lifetime, the perspective on wolves was changing. They were not exactly the devilish monster and threat to livestock that they had once been. As the federal level extirpation efforts came to the fore, the wolf hunters themselves began to modify the folklore around the animal. A certain respect for the, quote, doomed yet heroic last wolves began to emerge. Not entirely unlike native lore, in fact. There came now a certain respect for the cunning and resilient nature of the wolf, its ability to learn and evade traps, its outlaw nature, the fact that in a given pack there was often 1 or 2 wolves that were such skilled survivors that only a professional hunter would have the wherewithal and tactics to take them down. The slowly changing perspective on wolves is captured in a piece cited by John T. Coleman in his book Vicious. Quote, in his 1944 essay, Thinking Like a Mountain, Aldo Leopold traced the birth of his environmentalist land ethic to the killing of a wolf. Trained in forestry at Yale University, Leopold spent the early part of his career trying to manage the game herds in New Mexico's Guia National Forest. Predators had no place in the U.S. Forest Service lands. USFS employees destroyed the animals in order to maximize the number of deer, a resource coveted by recreational hunters. In the essay Thinking Like a Mountain, Leopold recounted how he and a group of rangers happened upon a pack of wolves chasing a deer. The men fired on the pack from a distance. They hit the leader, a female, and Leopold, quote, reached the old wolf in time to watch a fierce green light dying in her eyes, end quote. The sight changed him. Young and full of trigger itch, he had assumed that, quote, because fewer wolves meant more deer, no wolves would mean a hunter's paradise. But after seeing the green fire die, he sensed that neither the wolf nor the mountain agreed with such a view. Killing predators, it turns out, endangered Edens rather than creating them, end quote. Okay, so we've talked about wolves becoming dogs and even a little bit about dogs becoming wolves. We've talked about wolves becoming monsters and demigods, about people becoming wolves and becoming the sworn enemy of wolves and eventually becoming friends of wolves. There's one other configuration that I wanted to mention, and this is the classic trope of a child being raised by wolves. Mankind clearly domesticated these animals, but it appears that at least a few times in history, it went the other way.